Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a fascinating philosophical mystery, and it's one that's been hiding right in plain sight. For literally centuries, humanity has told stories about creatures that are half human and half, well, something else. But as you're going to see today, these stories, they were never actually about the monsters.
If you know your myths, you might recognize this one. It's the famous riddle of the Sphinx. Travelers arriving at the gates of Thebes had to answer this, or, well, they were killed on the spot. No pressure, right? The answer is a human being, crawling as an infant, walking upright as an adult, and using a cane as an elder. Now, this riddle is our perfect hook today because it wasn't about animals at all. It was the demand for human clarity. It was asking travelers to recognize themselves.
Section 1. Beyond the Monster Myth. Okay, let's dive into this. You see, the ancient Greeks didn't just sit around telling scary stories by the fire. They actually carved these half-human forms right into the Parthenon itself as this permanent, profound statement on what threatens civilization. The centaur is the perfect embodiment of this struggle. Like, think about the myth where centaurs were invited to a wedding. The wine starts flowing and suddenly, bam, they trash the venue and try to run off with the bride. It's because the centaur body is literally a diagram of the human condition. You've got the rational, intelligent human mind sitting right on top of these wild animal appetites that it can barely contain. But there was one incredible exception: Chiron. He was basically the greatest teacher in the ancient world. We're talking the guy who tutored heroes like Achilles and Heracles. He proved that the centaur form was a test, and he actually passed it. But tragically, he was accidentally hit by an arrow dipped in deadly hydra poison. And because he was immortal, the pain would literally never end. So Chiron made this heartbreaking choice. He traded away his immortality just to escape the endless pain. He gave up endless life for the uniquely human ability to stop suffering by dying.
Moving on to Section 2, Victims of Divine Power.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that while some creatures represent our internal struggles, others reflect the outside world. I'm talking about beings created entirely because of power dynamics and a total, absolute lack of consent. They didn't choose to be monsters. Take Astrion, the creature history usually calls the Minotaur. His real name, Astrion, actually means starry one, which is heartbreaking because he never even saw a single star. He was born with a bull's head simply because King Minos broke a deal with Poseidon. Astrion was just a helpless kid, brutally punished for his parents' mistakes, and locked away in a dark labyrinth.
You know the saying, history is written by the victors? The official story always celebrates Theseus as this triumphant hero who bravely navigated the maze, but the actual story? It's so much darker. King Minos needed to hide a living, breathing symbol of his own shame, so he built a prison and fed Astrion just to keep his secret buried. Think about it. Theseus was a guy with weapons, a map, and a clear way out, sent in to kill a completely helpless victim who had never once left the dark. It shows us exactly how absolute power handles inconvenient truths.
We see this exact same abuse of power with Medusa. In the earlier accounts, the ones preserved by Ovid, she wasn't born a monster, not at all. She was a beautiful, sworn priestess of Athena. But after being assaulted by Poseidon right there in the temple, she was transformed, exiled, and eventually murdered in her sleep by Perseus. And it doesn't end there. Her severed head was literally weaponized and stuck onto Athena's shield. Her agency, her power, it was relentlessly, continuously taken from her without a single ounce of consent. And then there's Arachne, the absolute finest mortal weaver in Lydia. Now, we're often told she was punished for her arrogance, but actually, her true crime was simply telling the undeniable truth. During a weaving contest with Athena, Arachne wove this flawless tapestry showing the gods behaving terribly, being completely hypocritical and abusing their power. For that brutal honesty, she was transformed into a spider, doomed for eternity to weave these intricate webs that are functionally invisible and entirely unacknowledged.
Section 3, Instruments of Cosmic Punishment.
So, from victims of power, we move to these terrifying enforcers, creatures designed specifically for cosmic punishment, beings whose very existence was entirely conditional on human failure. Enter the Harpies. Their name literally translates to snatchers. When King Phineus shared a bit too much of the future with mortals, the gods didn't just kill him. Now, instead, they sent the Harpies. Every single time a meal was placed in front of him, these wind spirits would swoop in, snatch it, and contaminate whatever was left. They were perfectly designed to keep him alive, but permanently starving. It is a brilliant, terrifying illustration of total, inescapable helplessness.
Which actually brings us right back to the Sphinx. She held the whole city of Thebes hostage with her riddle. But the very moment Oedipus answered it correctly,
Bringing human clarity to the situation, the Sphinx threw herself off a cliff. Think about the quiet devastation of that. She wasn't a noble guardian, she was a problem posed by the gods. Her entire existence was completely conditional on human failure. And the exact moment that failure was overcome, she just ceased to be.
Section 4. Nature, Grief, and Sea. The ancients had a deeply complex relationship with their environment, and their half-human myths really reflected the genuine terror and grief associated with nature. Take the beautiful but devastating boundary of the ocean. First things first, we've got to correct a massive popular misconception here. Sirens were not mermaids. Nope. In the original Greek tradition, they were half woman, half bird, and birds represented the boundary between the living and the dead. The true horror of the sirens wasn't that they viciously attacked sailors. It was that their music was so devastatingly beautiful, men simply gave up. They died listening because they completely stopped trying to survive.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the Greeks viewed the natural landscape. Nymphs weren't just, pretty background decorations for stories about gods and heroes. They were deeply, intimately tied to specific domains. Dryads, for instance, were so connected to individual trees that if you cut the tree down, the dryad died. It was the Greeks' way of insisting that the natural world actually has real interiority, that the world is inhabited all the way down, and destroying it is absolutely not a neutral act.
We see a similar, profound depth with mermaids across all sorts of maritime cultures. The oldest one, the Assyrian goddess Atargatis, was born when she dove into the water, just entirely consumed by profound grief. Or look at the French tradition of Melusina. She built a life with a nobleman on one strict condition. He could never see her fish half. And when he finally did, that life ended. These myths are telling us a coastal truth. They represent the deep sorrow of the sea taking people permanently, and the absolute tragedy of trying to build a life while hiding a fundamental part of who you are.
Section 5. Guardians of the Threshold.
As we move from the natural world over to human civilization, we run into the magnificent Assyrian Lamassu. These guys combine a human head with the body of a winged bull or lion. Now, these weren't just decorative. They were massive architectural statements built to communicate impossible scale and unquestionable divine authority. So the crucial point is, if you look closely at how they were engineered, they have exactly 5 legs, which is just brilliant design. From the front, 4 legs are planted firmly, making the creature look totally motionless and immovable. But walk around to the side and all 5 legs are visible in stride. It's simultaneously stationary and advancing, making sure this guardian is never, ever perceived as vulnerable.
These guardians actually outlasted the civilization that created them by nearly 3 millennia, almost 3,000 years. But tragically, in 2015, several of them were destroyed with sledgehammers by ISIS. And taking a sledgehammer to an ancient guardian, that carries a profound meaning well beyond just simple destruction. It fundamentally communicates a really chilling message. The threshold is no longer defended. Whatever this place once was, it is now wide open and entirely vulnerable.
Let's move to Section 6, the cost of being human, and see how this all builds together.
We've looked at centaurs, the Minotaur, the Sphinx, and guardians made of stone. And you know what? Every single creature we've discussed today shares one incredibly tragic quality. Not a single one of them chose what they were. They're victims of divine politics, of power, and a total lack of consent. They reflect our very own struggle to control our appetites and to hide the parts of ourselves we might be ashamed of. Ultimately, these myths aren't about terrifying monsters lurking at the edges of the map. They're highlighting the terrible cost of our own human half.
We're all caught between what we are and what we desperately want to be. These stories, they've survived for thousands of years because they force us to realize a really uncomfortable truth. The border between civilization and the wild, between reason and raw impulse, it's not out there in some distant fantasy world. The border is in us. I really want you to think about that the next time you hear a monster story. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning everything.